For me, spirituality was really like, it was a thing that I could just feel at a young age. Like my dad was very involved at the mosque. I learned Arabic. I learned how to read the Quran. I went to Sunday school. I still pray to this day. I mean, Muslims, it's the regimen we're pretty regimented.
It's five calls to prayer a day.
Five
right?
a day. You know what I mean?
Do you have a little rug?
I got a little baby rug. I got a big rug. I got the baby. I got the travel. Yeah. Sometimes I'll throw down a jacket. I'll pray. Yeah. Yeah. It's all. Yeah. I dig it.
That's awesome.
My Bluetooth was open, man. It airdropped and I felt it.
But how did that work?
But by the way, I'm also very much moved by, I can be in Italy and I can walk into a church and hear, calls to prayer and be moved by it. Like
Sure.
I'm just moved by that.
Well, in Islam, the divinity of Jesus is inherent in the religion and all the Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah, we big up Prophet Isa.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah.
How did it feel in your life growing up? Like what did it mean to you? Is it something you thought about a lot? Like walking into school, was it a feeling inside of you, or how did it manifest? How did it work on you?
For me, religion or spirituality has always been, how do I find agency and purpose and meaning in a world where I feel pretty small and insignificant and meaning. I don't know what things mean and why. And it gave me this really kind of beautiful, almost like a rope, something that you can hang on to. So much of comedy and let's call it like the modernism movement, and we've gone past to that to meta-modernism and then nihilism. These two things were in conflict with each other, and so, but I could always feel like a desire to ask the why, So it's interesting that my dad was a scientist, and so much of American thought and American kind of let's call it culture is very scientific and empirical and data-driven.
And probably 95% of all scientists and academics, for that matter,
Totally.
are atheists.
Yeah, or just there is an obsession with the what, like what the material world is all that matters. What is this? Let's use hypotheses and scientists, and let's be scientific. Let's have a scientific method to find out what are the key components of this table, and what is in it, and how many. It's H2O, 2 hydrogen for 1 oxygen. And yes, as a child who grew up with, shout out to the periodic table. I love the periodic table. My dad loves the periodic table. I was simultaneously into the what, but I also just was wondering the why. Like, why are we here? What does what happen? Is there a soul? What happens to me after?
Was there a
die?
conflict between science and faith in your household, or did your dad kind of like wed the two kind of effortlessly?
To me, like, I had amazing parents that just lived it. They lived a really beautiful, ethical, spiritual path that I was like,
that was not in conflict with
not at all.
Science and the periodic table and the enlightenment.
No, my dad has a PhD in chemistry. No, he's all up in science. Yeah, he loves science. My mom's a physician, so loves science. But shout out to Kaiser Permanente, but Kaiser is not trying to tell you what happens to you after you die, or do you have a soul, or
why are you here?
Why are you here? And what does this mean? Like, only religion, spirituality, art,
so why
poetry,
are we here?
Music. Why are we here?
Yeah. Come on, Hasan. Reveal the meaning of life.
I mean, if you want to start with, Surah Fatiha, we can start with Surah Fatiha. We can get into that.
Let's get into it.
No, I don't have that answer. What worked for me with my spiritual upbringing and the way I was raised Muslim is that Islam does a really beautiful job of combining two things that I think are really important and necessary to life, which is like, there's a practical element of like, you have to live in the world. We are physical beings of the world. But then there's also the spiritual element. So the rituals and a lot of the stuff that's laid out is pretty practical. When they talk about like Islamic finance and banking, and you shouldn't have usury or interest. Like, these things are really very practical, and they make sense 10 toes down in your lived reality on planet Earth.
Nice.
Awesome. Like, I'm with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Wu-Tang, enter the 36 chambers. I want to enter all 36 chambers. Quran, I want to enter all 30 chapters of this thing. Awesome. Like, I get the pragmatism of it. Simultaneously, it has a ton of, if you follow Sufism and if you follow like a lot of spiritual Urdu poetry, there is a huge, awesome spiritual component.
Yeah, mystical
Mystical component
Yeah.
to Islam as well.
Yeah.
Those two things is like kind of like who I am, which is awesome. So it worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but like it worked for me.
That's amazing. There's a quote from the Imam Ali, who was married to Prophet Muhammad's daughter and became the center of the faith for a while. And it's one of my favorite quotes of all time. In fact, I think I almost lead off my book with it. And it says, "Dost thou reckon thyself a puny being when within thee the universe is folded?" Wow. And you
What a
think about
bar.
that from both a scientific standpoint
Yeah.
and a mystical standpoint.
Yeah.
Do you reckon yourself a puny being when within you the universe is folded? The universe is folded within us.
Sure.
We are stardust. We have atoms in us that were there at the Big Bang.
Yeah.
We are miraculous stardust beings. All of the elements of the universe are somehow contained in our bodies. And at the same time, it has that metaphysical element as well. Like the universe is folded within me, the universe of possibility, of love, of hope, of beauty,
Totally.
of order,
Yeah.
and a reflection of the divine. That we are reflecting the divine in having a conversation like this
Totally.
and being open-hearted and using our imagination and using our humor and using language. We're reflecting the divine in the same way that beautiful galaxies in the Milky Way reflect the divine.
Yeah.
So there's that harmony of science and faith.
So I had this like upbringing, and so when a lot of my friends in like late high school, early college were like, "Let's do acid," like I gotta see God. I'm like, I already kind of had a pretty cool relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Ramadan's pretty intense. You got 30 days.
Yeah.
No food, no water. You go to the mosque at night, like you pray. It's pretty dope. And Rainn, Islam in its relationship to significant American art is pretty profound.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of Muslim artists. Islam is one of the, religions and also a pretty popular religion within hip hop. Mostef, Busta Rhymes. I mean, you can just list.
Yeah.
There's a ton of hip hop artists. Islam in its relationship to Black America has a deep influence in that. Shout out to Dr. Sherman Jackson, who wrote the book, Islam in the Black America. You should have him on the show. Then there's also its influence on music through Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam, a ton of stand-up comedians, Rami Youssef, Dave Chappelle. Like, it has had it has intersected art and culture and American art in a really beautiful way as well, which is really awesome. Like, it gets really cool when you really dig into it.
It also is really interesting to explore the intersection of the golden age of Islam around the year 1000 or so, and how that influenced the Renaissance.
Totally.
Everything from algebra and algorithms being created, and street lights, and the incredible inventions of that Muslim golden age. But then how Muslim thoughts, I think it was Muslims that really were translated the ancient Greek texts of the Bible and brought it, to Europe. I mean, those roots are also really fascinating. So much of what we think of as Western culture is owed to the Islamic golden age.
Totally. And for me, there's like certain books that I've read and things that I've learned about that like deeply just resonated with me. Another historical example of like, I remember learning about this during the Mughal Empire in India. There was the Mughal Emperor Akbar the Great. And there's a famous Hindi film called Jodha Akbar, which is like the story of Akbar, who's the Muslim prince, falling in love with, Jodha, the Hindu like princess, and they fall in love in this very Montague and Capulet, Romeo and Juliet sort of way.
Nice.
But if you read about Akbar and the way when he was ruling over India, he had these open kind of debates amongst different theologians openly in the palace. So you would have Jewish scholars and Christian scholars and Islamic scholars. They would all openly have this conversation about God and religious text. And it wasn't a punitive zero-sum game.
Right.
It was like, oh, we all coexist and we share these different ideas with each other. And I remember like reading about that and being like, that's really, really powerful. And it's a part of my own story. I grew up in a Muslim family. My wife grew up in a Hindu family. Like, these things are uniquely possible only because of my Indian heritage. And I believe Indian culture is at its best when it's all of those things happening at once, which is pretty awesome. People can debate. It's not like that. I don't agree with that. But like, these are particular pieces of work or pieces of history that spoke to me in a certain way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Like, you can read a book or listen to an album and it hits you a certain way and you're like, oh, wow, this profoundly changed my life and the way I look at the world and think about the world.
The Soul Boom Podcast. Subscribe now on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you get your stupid podcasts.